Now, obviously, the biggest question that everyone is thinking right now is, how does the current pandemic affect the migration scenario? And it's interesting to note that this isn't the first time we're facing something like this. I mean, obviously, the scale is something which is different, but as a concept, we've had or we've dealt with SARS in 2003, the H1N1 from in 2009. We had the Ebola pandemic in 2014, Zika from Latin America and the US in 2015. But the thing is that as individuals, as governments, as businesses, we've adapted to it, and it'll be quite interesting to see how we are going to see this, and that's going to form a part of the talk today as well. So for instance, we end up taking yellow fever vaccinations when you're traveling to Africa or South America. UK at the moment requires nationals to get TB tests done. CIC in Canada, as well as Australia, the Department for Immigration in Australia require applicants to do health checks. So the point is that we've adapted, as we've kind of been through the different, pandemics or epidemics in different regions. And given the scale and the severity of where we are at the moment, maybe we'll see a different kind of a shift. But that's something that is something that we are kind of looking forward to. So kind of getting into just a little bit of detail before we open up for Q&A and have a discussion on how this is shaping up. It's just useful to understand what's out there, what are the options which are available to individuals. So for example, when we look at the US, we have different options like the L1 visas, the E2 visas for treaty country nationals. You also have the EB5, which is kind of fairly popular. So people have heard of it. From UK's perspective, we deal with tier one investors, which require an investment of about £2 million odd. We also have what's known as a sole representative visa, which is generated for businesses, media houses. They can test the waters in the UK with this, and you have the tier two general, as well as the innovator and the startup visas. So countries are still looking at encouraging businesses to come in, individuals with ideas to come in and look at making a start, in those regions. With Canada, we look at the provisional investor program, which is essentially, looking at different provinces. So you could have, say, Ontario as a province to make an investment. At the second tier, you could have British Columbia, which is looking at it. And at the third level, you could have provinces like Yukon and Manitoba. So as you see from your screens, all of these different provinces have different thresholds when it comes to investments and things like that. And they're still looking at bringing people into the country. The amounts that we're mentioning in terms of the investor category for Canada, these are not your minimum threshold amounts. These are what is needed to make an application more successful and have a better chance of success. So that's why you would see that these are higher than the prescribed numbers. And in Australia, I mean, there is subclass 188 at the moment, which is there for investors and for businesses, to be able to enter in and make investments in different provinces or states in Australia. In addition to that, what we're seeing now is also an increased impact in terms of what are known as golden visas, which are essentially permanent residencies. So you have countries like Greece, where you could apply for a PR, making an investment of only about 250,000 euros. Which allows you to carry out business in Greece, gives you access to travel in the Schengen areas, gives you a pathway to citizenship even. Then we have Malta, where you could again get a residence permit, making an investment of about 250,000 euros on the back of it. Applicants are allowed to work, study, carry out a business activity. And again, it forms a pathway to citizenship. So these are kind of the bigger programs in Europe that we see a greater traction of, depending on the ticket sizes of the investments, and what it offers to individuals is the ability to have a kind of a second home, so to speak. You would see, obviously, from what we see in the press nowadays and what we've been reading about how the COVID-19 has impacted these countries. And again, there isn't anybody who can claim that they have been able to get out of this unscathed. But the key part is, how are these countries dealing with it? What is the impact, on some of these countries versus some of the bigger markets, and how the businesses are getting affected. So that's something that we will be kind of discussing when we get down to the Q&A section as well, on here. And the last bit before we kind of jump through is to look at which are the different citizenship options, which are still popular. So typically within Europe, you can look at making an investment or a donation, and looking at getting citizenships for different markets. Now, what you see on your screen is a spread of what's available out there. Now, these are countries where, depending on how much money you have, whether you see this as an investment or whether you are ready to buy a citizenship in another country, you could look at potentially getting citizenship from as little as 6 months. So, to a maximum of 2 years, depending again on where you are kind of aiming for. Before we kind of go ahead, are there any questions on any of these on any of these countries, or is there any area where you need more information on? I'm just going to look at the chat, see if something's come through. Right, okay. So I've got a query looking at the investor visa. So we'll pick that up separately because that's a very specific question that you have. So we'll come back to that. Just looking at the chat for anything else. No, I think we're fine on that front. Right, so the message that we would like to leave you with, in terms of this presentation, is to say that yes, there is a bit of a a bit of a challenge at the moment in terms of where we are at and what we are facing, but there is hope on the horizon from a mobility perspective, and I think we will see a shift coming through on there over the next few months or so. So that's kind of the introduction from my side.